Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most revived work as it releases. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And Elliot, this is a reflecting episode. Aren't there supposed to be more people here? Where are they?
They're in the room with us right
now. I turned around and now I see them. How did that bit go? Was that good?
We're like flies on the wall.
Yeah. So welcome to Tommy and Dante from Twigging onto Twig.
Oh. Hi, I'm Tommy.
And I'm Dante. And you're listening to Pale Reflection, a podcast in which we do not talk about Twig.
We might talk about Twig a little bit.
Yeah, have we got some dedicated Twig comparison sections in our notes here?
I thought of tossing in a back to Twig section in the notes, and then I couldn't think of any Twig comparisons to make. But if we do, we can, I don't know, we'll figure it out. We usually wing it.
I kind of feel like Verona's alchemy is Twiggish.
Mm-hmm. That's
At
true.
At least what she creates.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, like, homunculi conceptually pretty Twiggish, I think. But anyway, we're not talking about Twig here, all right? If you want more Twig chat, go listen to Twigging onto Twig, everybody.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about Pale.
So a Twig plug, we can do those. Our fan art contest is still going on. That accepts Twig fan art. So I still haven't read Twig, but I assume there are some people who Till Death Do Us Part suits them. So do some Twig fan art of them.
Oh, do we get to judge?
If you're a patron, you get to judge. So yeah,
everybody gets to judge. But yeah, let's start as we normally do with our arc summary, just so we can take a look back at this long arc and remember things that happened at the start that feel like they're about 4 years ago.
This arc started in January.
This arc started off so far away from where we are now.
Yeah.
But yes, so 23.1, we're in Avery's head. It's a chapter where Avery is kind of alive and we get to see her re-entering the church and doing her shenanigans. Marcy goes beast mode and tries to chase her down with fast-moving blood attacks. But Avery escapes without any new injuries, yet still ends up needing to go to the hospital, where the parents start to harangue Avery about her injury a little bit.
Yeah, and then we jump straight into the first interlude of the arc. 23.A is from Kelsey's perspective. And this is basically a chapter where the three awarants are meeting up and discussing what the fuck to do about the girls. It's Can We Talk About the Girls Part 2. We learn a lot about Kelsey here. Like, she considers quitting her job, and we learn what her job is, and that she's basically good at it because she's like a Kenneteer at work. Anyway, this discussion eventually leads to the three awarenteers setting up their non-negotiables, including Verona getting a parent. Then they talk about parenting grumble for a bit, and eventually Kelsey concocts a plan. The awarants go to the Kennet Council and basically give them an ultimatum. Make the Kenneteers fucking stop, or we will call you forsworn.
In 23.2, Verona goes home, collects things from the burnt-out husk of the house and her family, gets support from her found family, finds some degree of closure, and has a better conversation with her house than she does with her father, who once again is demonstrably the worst. She formalizes the house on Half Street as a refuge for those who need it, and she tests the waters with bringing her mother into the world via an Alpy dream, which fails, and her mom gets a pregnancy scare. And then on the promenade, the Kennet others plan an assault on Chucky with a follow-up move by the Kenneteers, and Lucy is sent off to chat with the Sable. Verona realizes the awarants are responsible for sidelining them.
In 23.3, in Avery's perspective, Snowdrop is finally invested as Goblin Sage. And Avery herself gets some sage advice from Toadswallow. Go hard, go fast. She brings her folks on a family road trip back to Thunder Bay via the paths, and then spends her first class trying to convince her gym teacher that just because she got shot and died, that doesn't mean she isn't ready to take Toadswallow's advice, go hard, go fast, and run. Meanwhile, it appears things are getting a bit awkward between her and Nora, but Putnam has no patience for this and forces Avery to hang out with her and all her other friends until everything is absolutely fine.
Yeah. 23.4, we're with Lucy, who is off on her little road trip camping adventure with the dogs, who have fun times shooting at each other until an actual threat shows up that they decide to shoot instead. They get away from the black scalpel, but Lucy has put the question to Grandfather about getting more familiar.
Yes, and then 23.5 continues with Lucy. She's at the Sable's place, and it's work experience day, apparently, because the Sable lets Lucy watch as he kind of does his job. The Alabaster Assembly comes to visit, and we see how well the Sable and the Assembly actually work together. And then we also see how well Lucy rounds them out as a third voice, which leads the Sable to his pitch that she should be the next Carmine. Lucy isn't keen on it because that's a fucking stupid idea.
And a terrible job.
Yeah, but we do find out here from the Sable that London will be calling soon, and so there's a time limit now, and the Kenneteers do get a promise from the Alabaster that they can have a chunk of power from her when Charles pays her, so that's still coming. Anyway, after this meeting, Lucy helps protect a toad from other goblins and gets a special goblin friend out of it. She finds out Guillerme has left town and will never see him again. And she shares a hug with Chloe because she's about more than just war. Sorry, and before we move on from this chapter, I did just want to say something the Sable brings up in this chapter is a threat that is coming up soon, which he says someone keeps making gates between realms and not closing them. And there's a lot of doors opening on the horizon.
Yeah, I wonder who that could be.
Yeah, so that'll be fun.
Yep. Anyway, in 23.6, I get another Verona chapter. Sorry, Dante. Verona does some alchemy, gets an empty package on time, doesn't have the divine milk she needs, asks a huge sacrifice from Tashlet, makes Alexander, pisses off the judges, and the moon turns red.
In 23.7, I get another Avery chapter. She introduces Snowdrop to her family, and then she introduces Sylvia to the concept of paying attention to her family, aka Verona, who actually needs her to listen for once. And finally, Avery joins Lucy and Verona on a path to go over their strategy in secret while the rest of Kennet musters their forces for war.
We see that war first through the eyes of Cameron, who refuses to see the red flags in her relationship with Seth, despite her ability to see all the other colours pretty easily. We find out more about her relationship with her mother and her backstory as things become more grey and less black and white. But due to some colourful language from Belanger's, things are becoming more tense at the Blue Heron, and that's a lot of colours.
And then in 23.c, we jump to the other side of the war. We're in Mal's perspective. So this is Kennet's utmost their combatant. She joins a troop of Kennet found and Kennet below people in raiding the Blue Heron. They get ordinary familied. She then ends up at a bogeyman tea party, runs afoul of the brownies, and then eventually manages to meet local heartthrob Boy Suspicious. This new power couple teams up and heads into the brownie realm. They get up to lots of shenanigans in there. They drop some spiders on Seth, and eventually they rescue some captured others, including Boy Suspicious's sister, who he's very close to. Unfortunately, though, as they're escaping, we learn that all good things must come to an end, and the same is true for all Mal things.
What a great pun. In 23.8, it's a Lucy chapter, Lucy's mother fields Sylvia's panic because Jazz is Sylvia's parenting or Verona expert. There's a conversation with the defectors about forswearing, and the defectors tell the Kenneteers that they can't tell them anything. Louise smokes a cigarette, there's talks about compromise, and Yiyun is still pretty much the best. The Alabaster does her job as best she can, sets the Kenneteers on the path that they've kind of already been heading. The Undercity denizens plan a raid into the Upper City to try to survive. Charles kind of tries to kill Liz, and Lucy stands heroically alone against the family man.
In 23.d, which is also a Lucy chapter, but also has Bubblegum in it, who...
Yeah, I'll just interrupt you. So this is very much the point in the arc where the concept of a chapter belonging to one person completely disintegrates. I think from
absolutely.
here on out,
Yes.
there's at least 2
And
POVs in every chapter.
also the concept of interludes not being protagonist chapters.
Yeah. We're just there's too much shit going on right now for a single chapter just to be one thing.
Well, Charles is breaking the world.
Yep.
So anyway, Bubblegum reminisces about her epic romance with Toadswallow, and then meets up with Lucy's other dad mentors to deliver an epic goblin showdown against the Family Man. Marichika shows up with reinforcements, but Bubbles' moves are so epic that the Wild Hunt shows up lest they be out-epicked. And between them, they handily deal with all the baddies. Just kidding, Charles shows up and undefeats them right after.
God, what a strong moment that was. Can we just talk about that? Like, felt like, yes, the arc's coming to a close. The baddies are getting defeated. Oh, wait, no, never mind. Fuck. Oh, so good. So yeah, 23.9, Verona and Avery are setting up a diagram at the arena when they're attacked by Grabby Games guy. They leverage some innocence to give them some space, and that gives them the thought of finally kicking off their big plan. They want Louise on board first, so she gives her support, and then the soon-to-be-aware start showing up. Magic is real, get on board.
Yep, and then we got 23.E, which cuts straight to our first new aware, the horse lover, Jeremy Clifford. He watches as the Negatier parents freak out about where their kids are, and along similar lines, Mia freaks out about where Lucy might be. Everyone calms down, and eventually they become part of this diagram to help stabilize the Undercity, but some bogeymen attack. Luckily, the local cool cats are on the case. We then cut to Sylvia, who is in Verona's domain for the first time, demonstrating her keenly honed abilities to not listen to Verona. Mr. Gill's also heading to the BHI, which is a plot thread that I don't think has gone anywhere yet.
Not yet.
And then to round out the chapter, we cut to Lucy, who does not let being blind, deaf, and a hemophobic stop her from kicking the Family Man's ass.
Multiple times. In 23.F, which is a Dorian, Fluorescence, and Griffin chapter, the hosts of the Boundary Spirits fight alongside Matthew from the perspective of Dorian and Fluorescence, who are very much little fish in a big pond. The Ordinary Family fights Monty and the Turtle Queen, and there's also a ruinous worm just bouncing around eating things. Monty is ripped in half by the Ordinary Family, which is an oh no moment. Dorian connects with Fluorescence really well and fights the Girl by Candlelight with Matthew and the rest of the gang, including his rival Engine Head. Matthew and the Girl by Candlelight have a heart-to-heart. Dorian Essence makes the key moves to let the Turtle Queen and Monty turn things around against the Ordinary Family. The GBC is defeated, and Soot Sleeve lays claim to her castle. Afterwards, Griffin is gross, Ramjam is captured and set against the Kennet allies, which is a bigger oh no. Griffin prevents Ramjam from doing any kind of malicious compliance, participates in some more spirit surgery, and then fights Luna Hare and the ballerina with his weird splitting people into constituent layers of magic trick. But the ballerina is so focused on herself that even splitting up, she can still act and do what she needs to do. Killwagon is beaten by the Kims, and Chuck tells his allies that London, Ontario is about to call.
This is very chaotic, and I think we need that auger wall that just says, oh no.
Yes.
Part of me was hoping when Avery called Y in 23.Z, I was like, Avery, ask him what the wall says. Like,
the wall is one of my favorite artifacts.
Yeah, it's the most powerful augury tool we've seen in the story. Like, what does the wall say?
You guys have saved the last and hardest one for me. 23.Z, Avery, Marichika, Guillerme, and Chucky, and who knows who else's perspective. The battle is raging on. Avery is calling in favors from the heaviest hitters she can think of. Y, Florin, Liberty, and some dude named Mr. Knox. Meanwhile, Marichika faces down against the Wild Hunt. The Wild Hunt reveals their trump card, which is the consort of Dark Fall. The consort reveals her trump card, which is Brizzarbane, who is alive. Marichika reveals her trump card. She knew that all along and has overthrown the Fey Courts and has the consort killed. But Guilherme reveals his trump card, which is that he anticipated all of the above and has brought all of Marichika's failures home to roost in the form of a spear that traps Marichika in her own 300-year box of suffering. Oh yeah, and also Charles confirms with London that the judges are in agreement and, quote-unquote, it is done.
I love all the trump card stuff. That so sums up Faye interactions. It's like, but you see, I all along.
Yep.
So huzzah, that was an arc.
Yes, huzzah.
But yeah, just going through those summaries, seeing, we go from 23.1, which is about Avery being alive, and you're at the end, and you've forgotten entirely that was an issue or worry at all. It feels like so much time has passed, and it's been 2 days in story.
Yeah, this is just one of those things I've noticed. Like rereading some Pact recently for when I was on Pale in comparison. It's just one of those things like how much more Wildbow does now, where it's like in Pact, our summaries for chapters were like one sentence each, and they're like 9 chapters in an arc, so it was fine. Whereas like, now we're here and we're like 15 minutes into this episode and we're just finishing the chapter summary. Like, it's just crazy how much shit happens in a single arc or even a single chapter now.
Well, the chapters are a lot longer now than they used to be,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Yeah. Oh, but then also I think they're denser too. It's like double the word
Absolutely.
count and also double the stuff. So it's like 4 times as much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be kind of really curious, had we been doing, with all this context now, had we done your Arc 1 Pale Reflections episode, what the summaries would have looked like, just comparatively.
Just like 2 words per chapter.
Yeah, I could probably dig up the ones we made with Scott and Matt for that episode, which is actually we were talking about something recently on the Discord. It was about Pale, and Scott was there, and he still hasn't read past Arc 1. So we're talking about some of the stuff that's going on in Pale, and he was just like, it was very funny because he was just kind of like, "What the fuck are you like?" He's still like, "This is 3 little girls trying to solve a murder with like 8 characters in the town." Like, it's
Hungry Choir's the big bad, right?
yeah. Like it's funny how far the stories come, and you really get that sense when you see someone who's only read Arc 1 try to react to words describing Arc 23.
That's a very appropriate reaction to that. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting, though, is that like every time we have one of these reflecting episodes, there's always the comment of, "Oh man, I can't believe that like all of this has happened since the last
in
arc."
one arc. Yeah.
But in this case, looking back on the beginning of the arc, I didn't feel that as much, that the stuff at the beginning of this arc was so far away. It was like, oh yeah, that stuff at the beginning of arc just happened. But then I was astonished at how much stuff had happened in the meantime.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think you bring up somewhere in the notes just how much this arc is, it's you, Dante, who did, is bookended by Marcy.
Yeah, because the last arc ends with her suffering a big defeat and Avery pulling a spike out of her.
Yeah.
And then this arc ends with Marichika suffering a big defeat and Guilherme chucking a spike at her.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, you're right. This is the downfall of Marcy arc, isn't it?
This is the downfall of Marcy arc.
Which I think is... I'm sort of trying to articulate this thought because it's coming to me right now. The Marcy is defeated because of the way she makes promises and technically follows through with them, but doesn't. And I would not be surprised if that will also be, on some level, Chuck's downfall.
In what way?
I mean, him being like that is part of the reason why we're all trying to bring him down anyway. So I think that's already part of his downfall.
I suppose. It feels like the text is bringing that explicitly, making that point explicitly.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's an interesting subtle difference in how they use people, though, because Marichika gives you empty promises and uses you as a pawn for her own game. Like the big sort of thing from 23.z is we learn that like she's just kind of playing this whole game we didn't even really know about. Whereas Charles uses people as tools, like which is similar, but it's like a little distinct. Like I still very much have this image of Charles as he views everyone as components. He's a summoner, so
Right.
he views you as like what you are built out of, and that's very much like he collects people. Like there's at the end of 23.z, and I'm probably going to use too many examples from that chapter because we literally just recorded our episode on it. But
I deliberately did not listen.
I deliberately did listen.
Fresh.
But he has that moment right at the end where Charles gets together with all of his allies, and he very much describes them all in terms of like their major component. Like it is Forsworn scarred, it is Kim's break people. These guys are broken. Like I think that's a little bit indicative of how he thinks of people. They're all kind of tools that have purposes, and I'm sure he applies that to himself as well. But like I think that will be an interesting angle to potentially go forward with Charles, is this idea like he views people as tools, and a bad workman blames his tools, right?
Fair enough, yeah.
I have to say, I'm surprised. I'm kind of surprised that Marika was eliminated from the story before Charles. I was expecting her to kind of be part of his downfall and outlast him. Although, I mean, we don't know that she's gone. Like she might have, another plot already in motion that'll come up again, or maybe.
Oh, that wasn't actually Marissa. That was what's her face, and
they
did it again.
Oh man, that would be so funny.
Well, and also Mariska is in a box, and if we know one thing about boxes, is that that's Rook's thing. So who knows? Depends where Rook's positioning is regarding.
I mean, I do think from a bit more of a dualistic sort of standpoint, like out of the story, I think Charles has always been the big bad, and I certainly to me always kind of felt like Marissa was really the string puller and kind of the big bad behind the curtains. But I think the story has always very much angled Charles as the big bad because he's the one who's most against the stuff the Kenneteers stand for. So it's like I think it does make sense to get rid of Marissa before Charles, mostly just because like I think Charles is more directly against what the story is saying is good, and so he should be the main bad, so he gets to last the longest.
That's fair.
Because right now there's nobody left of the original conspirators, right? The girl by candlelight is gone. Yeah, it's just Chuck.
I mean, Liz is still kind of alive if you count Liz.
I don't count her as one of the original conspirators, though, right? She joined in later on.
Yeah, same with Blunt Munch.
Yeah. Oh, right. I forgot about Blunt. I did forget about them entirely. What has Blunt Munch done recently? Has he shown up at all?
He was in Biscuit's interlude, and I think he showed up once after that too. But like, I think he's mostly just in prison, hopefully rehabilitating.
Yeah, he hasn't really been up to much recently. That's for sure.
Though, if we're talking about goblins and Gashwad, there was one thing I was rereading and I thought was really funny. I did note that Gashwad was by the sign. She'd heard him muttering to himself. He didn't have the ability to magically teleport, and he'd given them little shivs that were supposed to summon him, so it looked like his game plan was just to stalk them until they had an occasion to use the things. She wasn't sure what he was thinking for when they split up. That just sounds like just so absurdly stupid and goblinish.
Yeah.
It's like
it's such a dumb plan. He's such a fucking idiot.
Gashwad is like he's got high ambitions and he forgot to plan for the stuff in the middle.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is Gashwad's like whole thing, right? He's not actually a fighter. He's like a trickster goblin, but he doesn't want to be. So it's like his whole life, like his shiv is clearly designed to be like a dog of war, right? Like you use it when you want to summon him for violence. Like he's trying to be a discount dog of war, but he's shit at it. So it involves him doing a whole lot of work to just stalk the Kenneteers and hope they use it. Like I love him. He's such a little idiot.
I love it. I really am picturing him sort of scuttling under bushes and hiding behind trash cans, just pretending that they can't see him.
And presumably getting really fucking mad that Lucy was fighting the family man and he wasn't being summoned yet.
Come on, come on.
Yeah.
I'm sort of imagining that Gashwad's real ultimate goal with this is he's like, Toadswallow's trying to make goblins into discount Fae. I'm going to make goblins into discount Dogs of War, and then I'm going to be better than Toadswallow.
Well, yeah, I think that, definitely, I think we talked about this in our episode on that chapter when it came out, but like, if you want to develop the ability to be summonable and teleport, you have to kind of trick the universe into thinking that it can happen. So Gashwad's going about it in presumably the right way to gain that as an actual power.
That's true.
Just very incompetently.
We can still laugh at him in the meantime.
Oh yeah,
it's hilarious.
I do love the idea because Lucy has focused on the trifecta of Fae, Goblin, Dog of War a lot, and I love the idea of actually Gashwad representing goblins being able to pursue the Dog of War stuff. It's just he's not at Toadswallow's level yet, is he?
Well, that's kind of. I think there have been a few things like that, right? Like Blunt Munch was kind of like that. Doglick was like that back in the days when John was around, right?
Yeah. Like the Dogs of War have always had an affinity for goblins for sure.
Well, Doglick is his own case because he's trying to make goblins that are also dogs.
Yeah, true. Not necessarily Dogs of War, just dogs.
Who thinks he's a dog? Who thinks he's a dog?
But I feel like the Dog of Wars have always kind of bridged that gap, which is why Lucy sort of does also because of her affinity to John originally.
Yeah.
That gap being the Fae Goblin gap.
Yeah, I guess it just like Toadswallow has identified this link between Goblin and Fae, and he's exploring it a lot more. And I think Gashwad it's a cool idea to think Gashwad's doing the same in his own direction. Because there are these similarities, but that doesn't mean you can't have someone like Gashwad try to push it further. Like he's trying to create a shiv that works like a Dog of War's tags.
Yeah,
like he's trying to explore it and take it to the next level.
And I'm pretty sure that if he started to use that goblin glamour, I forget what they call it. They might just call it goblin glamour. Gunk. He might be able to accomplish it.
I mean, there's also just the funny element of this. Like, he has a weapon form, right? Like,
yeah, that is true.
He could have given them his weapon form, been like, here, I'll turn into a shiv and then turn me back when you need me.
He could literally have been carried into the battle like this, but he's so determined. And there's been a lot of this has been talked about a lot in our podcast because I'm so determined to one day find out what his weapon form is. It's like, yes, I can see why he doesn't want to use his weapon form or whatever, but I just think it is so funny that he's come up with just a fucking shit workaround. Like he's just such an idiot.
I'm pretty sure at this point, Wildbow's just like refusing to reveal Gashwad's form specifically because of you.
Just taunting you.
I don't think Wildbow's that petty. But if he is, I'll outlast you on this one.
Well,
I think Gashwad's weapon form is just completely ridiculous, and that's why he refuses to use it.
Yeah, I love the idea that he's really embarrassed of it. That's been pitched because he's not a violent dude.
It's actually a rusty fork, also.
I mean, yeah, God, I wouldn't either. That's fair, actually. If it turns out his weapon form is a rusty fork, I would totally understand. Like, nobody needs that.
Speaking of goblin forms, we did see quite a few of them in this arc, which was fun.
Yeah, that was an awesome scene.
Yep.
I don't even remember what all the forms were, but just all the synergy of it, and like Bubble was practically juggling them in there.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there? Yeah, there's the one goblin that she summoned with the chainsaw embedded in his back.
Yeah, Socknash.
Which is it's not a very. I guess that's a Toadswallowed name, probably.
Oh, I assume so. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty tame as a goblin name.
I also just because I know we'd seen it before, but I get a kick out of Biscuit's weapon form every time too. Like the frisbee that's just kind of lumpy. That's just so funny.
It's very Biscuit. It's classic.
Should we do? So we've moved it up in our notes, and I think just so we can get down to the rest of it, let's do our definition part. So we're going to go over the definition of go for the throat nice and early this arc. So just in case anyone is not aware, the definition of go for the throat is to exert an unrestrained, aggressive effort, especially by assailing an opponent or victim's area of greatest vulnerability. But the other thing we wanted to note is obviously usually the phrase used for here is like go for the jugular or go for the kill. Go for the throat is kind of the less common one. And so Wildbow very specifically chose to use the word throat.
Is that right? I've heard go for the throat more commonly, but
I agree with you.
Also,
yeah.
Really? I
think
go for
you're
the
alone
jugular
there.
is the normal one, right?
I mean, I think they're kind of equivalently common.
Yeah.
But I think it's worth that, Wildbow chooses one word over another for a reason. So
Yeah.
even if it is the more common phrase, it's still worth exploring why you picked it.
I mean, we talk about that in our Twigging onto Twig pretty often, the specific word choice.
But yeah, I mean, I think the thing to point out pretty strongly that I know a lot of people have said is around the throat chakra, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well the story made that pretty explicit by the end, I think. Like we sort of talked about it early on in the podcast as a maybe, and then I think it was Avery who specifically called it out.
Yeah, I think you, Dante, pulled out the specific quote.
I want to destroy him too, but we can't. We go for the throat, Avery said, and she touched fingers to her own throat, meaning the point of self. Communication, connections, society.
And I think that's really important also because I think this arc, more than a, intense battle and connection thing, is an arc about the connections that the Kenneteers have made and the connections that other characters also have to each other. There's the Lucy with the dogs on the camping trip. There's Verona with her found family. I mean, the entire assault on the Blue Heron Institute happens because of the connections between the different people that they have, and they use the connections to save the people coming up from, in the Undercity, or the ones that they can save are saved because they have connections outside of the Undercity.
Yeah, I think it's so perfectly pale that Go for the Throat gets to simultaneously be about the big war at the Blue Heron Institute, but also all about communities and connections and socialization, because that's what Pale's really been about. And so,
100%.
Yeah, of course, Wildbow managed to find a way to kind of do both at the same time. And especially, what's fun about it is that whole throat being connections thing. That's really like an Otherverse thing. Or maybe he stole it from some real world mythology. I'm not sure, but it's it's been established in the universe that the throat, that's what the throat is. And so I love using wordplay that's built out of your own story to kind of get to have Pale have its climax be so community focused as well.
It's also just the contrast of that, as you're saying, the being community based, and the words themselves being so inherently aggressive and violent.
Yeah.
Also, at the very beginning of this arc, we just came off of an Avery heavy arc, despite Avery missing from the arc. And classically, a wolf goes for the throat when it's attacking. So I was very much expecting that this arc would be dealing with the aftermath of Avery nearly being dead. And it does to a point, but I thought we'd be seeing, the wolf on the paths and all that. And, we very much did not and went in a completely different direction.
I was going to say, just on the subject of the communication and connections, because when we're talking about that, we usually focus on the connections that the Kenneteers have made, because that's been a big part of their whole idea, the idea of Kennet, the idea of the markets, Avery and her path. It's all just communication and connections. But what Avery actually says is we go for Charles's throat, his communication, his connections. And so, there's also that part which we don't really discuss as much, because we don't really see it aside from his network of other lords.
Yeah, well, I think the big part of how their plan attacks his throat is because they say their awarening plan will mostly weaken seal-based practices, and Charles is a seal-based other at this point. So, their plan kind of goes for his throat because they're basically taking Well, they're abusing his connection to the seal, and by making everyone aware, or by making a lot of people aware, they're essentially reducing his connection to the area.
I kind of want to think of it the other way around, because Charles, in that sense, is kind of a lone wolf, to borrow the wolf imagery again. We said before he thinks of the other people as tools. He's a summoner. He summons them as tools. But awareing them kind of forces him into a society where he has to have these connections and communication with a lot more individuals. So it's not that we're destroying his connections, but forcing connections upon him.
Well, I mean, isn't that kind of what the point of the end of the arc is? These other powers giving him legitimacy, bringing him into the fold, as it were, is creating connections between...
That's also true. Yeah, connections between him and the other major powers around the world.
Though clearly he seems to be planning on using those connections to take them down as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So any other go for the throat definition-y bits?
Well, there's also the fact that the Carmine killed herself by biting out her own throat.
That's a good call.
Love that.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily if that's setting us up for anything, really. I mean, I have in the notes here, revisit when arc is over, and I'm not sure it did that.
No, it's a good through line to keep an eye on, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, she died alone and isolated, right? So that's imagery I'd never picked up on before.
Yeah, there were a couple other little throat references I saw. There's the goblin shoving the toad down Toad Swallow's throat. There's the black scalpel cutting faces and possibly cutting throats. And even the advice that Toad Swallow gave to Avery, he's like, do you know how you handle it when your load wobbles? You tow that load faster and harder. Show it you're the boss. And it's like, it's not the same sense of going for the throat, but, opening the throttle is a throat. Open that throttle and go.
Yeah, it's very in the spirit of the traditional definition of go for the throat, which is like go hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I think it's worth pointing out, like, just the metaphor completely straight. Like, there's a lot of throat imagery that we've talked about, but just like the simple metaphor of, going hard and going for a vulnerability, like, that was explicitly called out. Lucy said, we're hoping our guys can find or create a chink in his armor for us to go after. They're trying to find the critical vulnerability of Charles. And I don't think we actually found one. He certainly didn't seem to.
Whatever was there may not matter anymore anyway.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Although I'm kind of wondering, like, since Marishika is gone, maybe she was Charles's weak spot.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I like the idea that Marcy / Edith's death. I mean, like, something that stood out to me in the .z chapter is, Guillemette used Marcy's failed promises as part of the ammunition against her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I feel like Charles must have some of these for Edith, and like Charles made promises to Liz about stuff. Like, I don't know. That's got to come back to haunt him, right?
That's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. Yeah, that this is kind of how Charles will fall. Also, is these promises, these things that he's said and offered, and only half-heartedly necessarily follow through.
Uh-huh.
Though I do feel like, I don't remember who said it, but one of you said it, that Marcy is inherently a lot more self-serving than Charles. Charles is an ideologue in a way, I think.
Yeah.
Whereas Marcy is not.
The thing that jumps out to me about Charles at the end of this arc was when he was standing with all those allies, and like, I think I already talked about, like, there's none of the other original conspirators with him. It's also like, it's all people who are below him, with the possible exception of the Aurum, but I feel like he kind of internally treats the Aurum as his lackey.
Well, clearly, yeah.
So like with aside from the aura, Charles kind of stands at the head of his organization alone, which is obviously very antithetical to Pale.
Yes. And this is kind of just a continuation of that thought. And I kind of feel like Charles, were he at, the Charles who had just become the Carmine, were to see the current Charles, he'd be disgusted and horrified.
Well, yeah, that comes across some of the tinfoil I was spouting during the episode we just recorded. I think Charles is cooking something, but I do think it's really interesting. It's gonna be fascinating to see where Charles lands with this London power, because it does feel like he's giving into everything he supposedly stood up against.
Yeah, making all those little compromises along the way that have the revolutionary becoming the institutionalized power.
Yeah, even aside from how things go with London and Paris and whatever, like even as far back as when he was making allies with Musser, he was already being what he had sworn to destroy.
Yeah, he's definitely turned into one of those revolutionaries who's just a new dictator in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. And, gotten rid of, or, all the allies that brought him there along the way. As you were saying, there's nobody left.
He did, in his defense, he did kind of try to help Marcy. I think those two were closer than it sometimes appeared. He just couldn't do anything against the Wild Hunt, but he tried. So 1 brownie point.
Just the one, though.
Yeah.
Speaking of brownies, is that Briscoe down there, or was it someone else trapped? Because it did not. The description of that person down in the kitchens did not sound like Bristow, but
didn't it?
I choose to believe it was.
It couldn't have been anyone else.
I think if it was Bristow, because there are stories about the brownies taking other people as well. I feel like if it was Bristow, Wildbow would have explicitly confirmed it was Bristow.
I think so. Yeah.
I don't think he would have. I'm pretty sure that was Bristow.
Yeah, I'm Team Bristow just because I think we talked about this a bit, Reuben, in one of the other episodes. I love the idea we had Alexander, Marissa pulled Mossa out of herself at some point. I love the idea that all the old baddies are getting a little show in this fight. Yeah, exactly. And that was Bristow's cameo, and it's all he deserves is just to be a little guy who we barely even recognize.
Fair enough. I'll buy it.
I would even go so far as to say the idea that it wasn't Bristow is a tinfoil theory.
I do hope that is going somewhere. I guess from the end of 23.z, it kind of sounds like the Blue Heron's not a thing anymore, so fuck knows what the deal is with the brownies now, but I was kind of hoping they were going to do something with Bristow, because they seem to be using him to do something.
Well, don't the brownies jump ship in the Dorian chapter? I remember the line as I was rereading it. Someone says that the brownies are leaving, and Dorian says, or thinks he does not have the context to think that, and someone tells him, if the people who know if the bomb people are running away, it's time to run away.
See, I thought that was just implying that they were leaving because they knew a bomb was about to go off. They're just clearing the room.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Whether they've abandoned it permanently or temporarily, I figure it could go either way.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I mean, is their realm part of the Fae? Is Maristica about to dump the brownies in the real world? I guess we'll find out.
Knows? I do think that if the brownies are gone, there's no point in trying to reestablish the school, because that's clearly the reason why anyone would go there.
That was the biggest perk, 100%.
Yes. I mean, the only perk, right?
There were the connections.
Well, some people might have liked learning about magic. I don't know, nerds. I guess
losers.
Cool. What else have we got in here?
I kind of wanted to. I don't really have much to say about it, but when they're trying to figure out when the Cannoneers are trying to figure out the third anchor point for their big ritual, Melissa kind of offers to speed run the practice, awaken and take it to mess in like no time at all. And it was just interesting also because she's kind of giving, offering to give up a lot of what she has. Originally she was all for becoming part of the practice, but but she, now that she's an aware and she has her niche as an aware, she's happy there, and she's offering to give that up to save, Bracken and her friends and the connections that she has made.
That's a lot of character growth for her.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, and I really liked that part of 23.Z where she was explaining what Mal meant to her. We didn't really talk about it in our episode, but like that was an emotional moment.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm. The whole Mal thing, like, I can't even believe that it crossed. Did everyone else feel that was like a line crossed that hadn't been crossed before?
By Charles.
By Charles.
Mm.
I feel like, every time Charles shows up, it's a new line crossed.
Yes, but I felt that when Mal died or was unmade or whatever, like that was where the line went from like I want Charles to stop what he's doing to I want them to like make him pay because it's gone personal. It's a whole new level. He's not just a bad guy. He's also like just
scum.
Yeah.
Well, I think that part of the reason that death hits so hard is because as Mal's having the conversation with him as he's about to unmake her, they both lean into calling him her metaphorical dad. And obviously the concept of parenting has been woven pretty deeply into a lot of this story. So
yeah, especially in this arc.
This is a Verona adjacent character too. So like seeing somebody be even worse than Brett as a dad, like I think that's part of why it felt so offensive is because like as she's going out, the two of them are kind of admitting like, he's not like her god, he's her dad. He's killing her for power. Like that's not good parenting, I don't think.
Mm.
I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
But yeah, like we all need to meet our maker eventually, but Mal's was too soon.
Yeah. Speaking of parenting, that was a really big thing this arc. Jasmine trying to get the Kenneteers less involved, Verona trying to get Sylvia more involved.
Brett just being awful.
Well, I mean, we've seen Brett be awful before. Here he was just kind of like absent, and we like him better that way.
I don't know. I feel like the chapter where Verona goes back to the house and gets stuff was Verona. Verona tries one last time, and I think it's called out in the text, or Verona calls it out. She's giving him a last chance, and he just does not step up.
Mm-hmm.
He's still.
I'm fine with that. Good riddance to him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just, for Verona's sake, Verona keeps trying.
Yeah.
And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think that's inevitable as long as they're in proximity. Like, I would be more worried for the Verona who was able to still be around Brett and had completely given up on ever giving him a chance again. In fact, that's kind of where we were early in the story, and she's gotten better at that.
Mm-hmm.
But like this is why the key for Verona and Brett's relationship is just distance. Like they just should not be near each other, because if they're near each other, then yeah, like the best case scenario is Verona keeps trying to give him chances because it would be weird not to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you expect, I don't know, just the way you're saying that, do you see a potential reconciliation on some level when 20 or 30 years down the line type of deal? Or
I never to the point where they're close, but like I could see in the distant future a Verona who's able to sit down and have a coffee with her dad for a bit once every couple of months, like a relationship that's not openly hostile. But I think the ship has probably sailed on them ever being close.
I think it's worth noting the parallel between Verona offering her dad that one last chance and the Kenneteers, who have been offering one last chance to the Negateers and to Charles and to all these other people. Like that's been a big part of their play, and Brett is being treated the same way as the major antagonists here.
Well, I think Brett, on a narrative level, is one of the major antagonists of the story. He defines Verona's story. It's well, sorry for the stuttering and muttering here. I'm articulating this also right now, but I mean, Verona and Charles. Verona was the closest one to Charles, the one who had the most of a connection to Charles, and I don't know if there is a point that I'm trying to make with that and her connection with Brett, or her relationship with Brett. But I just kind of wanted to point out that, we talk about Lucy with father figures a lot, but I think it comes up with Verona in a very different way, but almost as much with these sort of antagonistic father figures.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I mean, I'd pick Charles over Brett, but yeah.
I mean, Brett hasn't actually unmade his children for his own power base.
I mean, not physically.
Kind of, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I feel like he very much has. His whole thing has been, using and deconstructing Verona for his own, I don't want to say stability, because it's clearly not stability, but he's been using Verona as his anchor and his support for
that's true.
however many years, and I think that's the mundane, physical, mental version of what Charles just did.
I think stability actually is a good word for Brett. He's just in a bad stable state, but it's pretty fucking stable. To your point about Kenneth is giving people chances and stuff. I know I'm backtracking a bit here, but I think because something that has been prominent in Pale since the beginning is concepts around justice and punishment, and Kenneth has very clearly always been much more about rehabilitative stuff. That's very much missing the Kenneteer's jam. But something the story hasn't been afraid to explore as a part of that is how you can't really help people who don't want to be helped. And Melissa was actually one of the first really fun examples of that. They tried to stop her being aware, but she was such a pain in the ass back at that point in the story that it didn't work. And Nicolette couldn't help her. And obviously that's worked out in the end. I would credit Melissa a lot with the Kenneteers being willing to do their current awarening plan, because that's ended up actually kind of working out with Melissa. But that's Melissa only happened because the Kenneteers kept giving her chances. And so it's you see, sort of Brett and Charles and stuff keep getting these chances. And it's basically because that's what Kennett's ethos is they're going to keep trying to help you, but you can't help people who don't want to be helped. And that's Brett and that's Charles.
Well, can I also point out that Charles specifically is aware of that's the Kenneteers, MO. He when they're talking to the defected Negateers, they say, oh, Charles knows that you bring enemies in as allies eventually, and he wanted to get out ahead of that, so made us swear oaths that say that we can't tell you things and we can't offer help.
Yeah, but he's the good guy in some way.
If you say so.
He says so. That's well, actually, no. I think that's what's fun about Charles. I think Charles knows he's kind of shitty. He's one of those, and this is my favorite kind of villain. The one who's he knows he's a bit villainous. He just thinks that's necessary. His criticism of Miss and Kenneth is really just that they're a bit soft.
Oh, a lot of the Negateers and people in that sphere have made that point that it's I'm in this because I know that I'm the bad guy and I don't care.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not an argument without any foundation. I mean, if they'd killed the family man 6 arcs ago, there would have been less shit to deal with in this arc. It's a line that everyone kind of has to draw or somewhere where you're willing to do this stuff. It's eventually they did have to kill the family man, but they tried not to. But you could argue things would have been a lot fucking easier if they'd done it the first time.
Can we just talk about how just badass Lucy was fighting the family man over and over and over and over.
And then at the end, she's just like, "Oh, I was trying to make it all the way to 9."
Sorry, I only got 7 victories. That's my bad.
Disappointing.
Yeah, step it up, Luce. Honestly, Verona and Avery had to come in and carry the fight for her. Just like, weak.
I'm sure she could have done it had they not come in and stepped in early.
Cool. Well, I quickly, I had one point written here in the notes, but I think I probably talked it to death already in our main episode, just about the concept of endings and what this arc is seeming like it's heading towards. So maybe we'll just save some of that for the predictions. So is there anything else anybody wants to talk about before we get into the questions?
Well, you mean you're predicting that we are now moving into the end game of Pale?
I thought I'd change it up and predict that Pale's about to No, I think there's some interesting stuff 23.z says about the nature of endings, but most people have probably already heard me blab on about that. So,
well, you said I'm pretty sure you said in the episode before that you weren't going to go into it too much there because you were going to talk about it here.
Yeah, but then I feel like I did anyway. Let's save it for the bold and specific predictions corner then maybe.
Okay.
For now, I'm going to start hitting you with the questions that we ask everybody who comes on here.
Oh no!
Starting with which Kennet other would be your choice for familiar?
All right. So, when you ask this question, are you just the OG Kennet others or like all of them?
Both. Now you have to answer both.
Oh, great. Okay, so that makes it a lot harder. Because of the original Kennet others, maybe Alpy. I don't really have an answer for that one, but she just seems one of the ones that's the least like demanding as a familiar. I feel like all the others have things that she'd be that they'd be asking of you. As for Alpy, she'd just be content and happy to, be able to take a small break from nightmaring around.
I also think I reckon the big appeal of Alpy is like kind of a big thing that defines her as another is she has that like routine and she's really good at getting her work done and stuff. And I could use a bit of that. Like I'm a hot mess sometimes, and like that ability to just be really kind of routine based to get your work done, like huge boon.
Okay, so quick question: what is Alpy's animal familiar form?
Probably some kind of horse, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it could be like, especially if Carolyn took her.
She's a mare, isn't she?
Yeah, but I feel like mare not in that way. Like I'm sure there's a different definition of like when I hear nightmare, I don't think night horse.
No, but it's close enough of the symbolism that I would assume that would be the default form.
I feel like Alpy's a guinea pig, like just a pitch black guinea pig. Don't ask me why.
I think she would become one of those little Scottish ponies.
No, she just has guinea pig vibes. I can't tell you where that's coming from, but I
have no idea where that's coming from.
It's just she's a guinea pig.
Okay.
All right. But now my real answer to your question is obviously Ram Jam, just because I love his, guileless enthusiasm. He's just so genuine. And also I'm pretty sure his animal form would be a gaunt skeletal ram, because that's kind of what he looks like as a goblin, which sounds entirely impractical but fun.
I have to say, Ram Jam is pretty great.
Ram Jam's the best.
You can't hate Ram Jam. Like, it's illegal to hate Ram Jam.
You can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ram Jam is the best. And I am very sad that he got captured.
Yeah.
Yeah, now he's one of the bad guys.
Well, he tried not to be. I tried very hard not to be.
Yeah.
I really appreciated they tell him, come here, so he lowers his head and sprint.
He is good.
Yeah, he's great.
What about you, Dante?
For my answer, I don't even remember who any of the OG ones are, because there have been so many that have joined. They're all OG at this point. But we met a new foundling this week who had that pretty epic violin ability. I was like, I can see that being a good familiar for me. Before she showed up, I was like, I have no idea what I would say for this, but now she's there. and that's who I would pick.
I don't think we got a name for her, but I've just been calling her the Red Violin because it seemed like an Umbrella Academy reference.
It could be.
Well, do you mind reminding me her ability? It was like it was the coordination through music, right?
Yeah, it was like she would play the violin, and then the ordinary family couldn't get at anyone.
Right.
And there was probably more to it than that, but that was kind of what the effect that we saw.
It seemed like her song kind of prevented violence, like it let them move forward unobstructed, and because it fucked with some of Marcy's angels too, from memory.
Mm-hmm.
That is true. Yeah.
Before that, I probably would have said Gillette, maybe.
Gillette's taken.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're stealing her from Verona?
She's not taken yet. They haven't made official.
So the obvious question here, what is Gillette's animal form as a...
Dog.
Yep.
I mean, imagine how pissed she'd be. Like, because it is.
It would be very funny.
I think the familiar document did say that the animal form is based on a mixture of the person and their familiar. So there is probably a world where Gillette makes a really bad agreement like this and comes out of it as a dog, and it's just like, what the actual fuck?
I hate every part of this. So, did you guys ever answer this question?
We answer it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they answer it every time. We still have to answer it again.
Yep, you do.
Toadswallow, I think, is the correct answer. I would follow Toadswallow on his journey of goblin improvement. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm still riding the Biscuit train. Like 100%, I'd take Biscuit as a familiar.
Terrible answer.
If you took her as a familiar, would you end up being her Barney, or would that be separate?
I think we could talk that out. Yeah.
Your Biscuit devotion is so hardcore.
Biscuit is great, but she's great when she's like, on the page and not, around me.
Well, yeah. I mean, whatever you say.
You don't want to take some magic crocodile?
I'd rather not.
So yeah, the other question that we ask everybody who comes on the show is, who is the best Kenneteer of the OG3?
Yeah, it has to be OG3. And yeah, again, thanks to Megafire and Jay for trying to get past this question and sneak answers, so we had to clarify it's OG3 only.
Well, Verona's better than any of the other possible Kenneteers anyway, so...
I tend to alternate between them depending on the chapter, but normally I think it's either Avery or Verona more than Lucy. Like, Lucy's really cool, but I find her... This feels bad to say, but too serious. I feel like both Verona and Avery enjoy the magic far more. And I think Avery, for me, kind of gets the edge there because I find that Verona's a bit too much of an edgelord. But of course, she's, a 13-year-old girl, a 14-year-old girl. Of course, she's going to be an edgelord. But yeah, I think Avery is my answer. But it's hard to say.
I often find that Avery's chapters are the most fun to read, but I don't know. Verona's just the greatest.
Fair enough.
I mean, Lucy had a very Lucy's chapters this arc did make some very interesting stuff. I kind of feel like she, for a moment there, was my favorite, but by the end, I don't know.
I have to say, at the beginning of the story, it was like, Verona, I get her. Avery, I do not get her at all. Lucy, I do not get her at all. And just like having spent a year or however long it's been in their heads, getting to know them, and it's like, I love all three of them.
Year singular?
How long has it been? Has it?
No, it's been
more than
8 months
like
in
2.
Story, I think.
No. I mean IRL.
Out of Story.
It'll be 3 years in like a week and a half.
Yeah.
Wow. And this is the first Wildbow work that I've been following from the moment start. Wow, 3 years. What a different world.
Yeah, this story started just after COVID.
Oh yeah. Well, COVID years don't count because
oh yeah,
none of us could tell time for 2 years there.
That is definitely true.
Yeah. So the next question off the rank. This is a relatively
wait.
Damn it.
I'm making you answer all of these questions also. What are your current answers for them? I know you answer them regularly, but what is your current answer?
On my side, it's always Lucy. Lucy, ride or die. I mean, she's just such a badass, you know?
She is a badass.
She is, for sure.
So yeah, so the next question that we ask,
you're allowed to admit that Verona's the best.
Yeah, I think it's Verona, but it gets more and more to the point now. You could probably flip a coin between Avery and Verona. Like, I think Verona's just got the edge, but
yeah,
yeah.
I told you she's an edgelord.
Yeah. I feel the same as you do about, like, obviously, you know, all three of them are great, but we still are forced to choose. I think the thing for, like, Lucy's probably the one who I'd want to be friends with in real life, but I'm not like her, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think I'm the same page.
Okay, so now, yes, this relatively new question we've started asking all our guests. Given the choice, what do you think your practice might be?
I would probably do some sort of music-based practice, hence having the violin lady as a familiar. That's usually where my mind goes. I don't know exactly what it would look like. Sometimes I think maybe I would just, like, I don't know, build some sort of, like, magical structure out of harmony or something, or I don't know, look for, like, ancient magical chants or something. I don't know, but it would definitely be music-based.
I'm not suggesting this for you necessarily. It's just like a general idea I've had, but I'd love to see a combat music practice where it's like you're creating this music, and then it's like, so punches or hits have to be landed like on the beat. Like, just because, you know, we hear so much in this story, like Guillermo's constantly talking about how you take control of the battlefield and work things in your favor. And I feel like it's got to be possible to create like an arena where there's music and force people to basically fight in a rhythm game.
That sounds really interesting.
I do remember, it's probably many examples of this, but like sort of anime style showdown where they're fighting with guitars, which are shooting magic at each other. That was a thing in at least one show that I watched at some point, but I can't remember which one.
Isn't that in the Scott Pilgrim?
I haven't
At least
seen
in
that.
the movie version of it. There's a battle of the bands and dragons coming out of the speakers and stuff to fight the evil ex-boyfriends.
I should watch that again. I barely remember that movie.
It's been at least a decade since it came out, and that's when I watched
Yeah,
it.
same.
I just have these images.
That's not what I'm thinking of because I haven't seen that, but that does sound like the idea that I'm remembering.
And for me, I wrote something here, but I am going to disregard it because I remembered something else. I am not a knitter, but my wife is, and it seems to me that the act of knitting could so well be integrated into practice, especially in terms of like community and when you're knitting something, you're creating something presumably either for yourself or for others, but it's building a set of or this feeling of community through a repetitive pattern, and that just sounds very practicey to me, and that just sounds really cool.
I imagine it would have to be augury related, just because the whole thread aspect of it. Like,
yeah, Malia and I had a conversation. Wildbow also mentioned about this like months and months ago, and Wildbow did say, yeah, that it definitely something augury, but like I can also see it being tied to like I guess through augury you could probably argue some kind of good fortune for the person who's wearing the knit hat that you're given. Yeah, and it feels like a very non-combative practice, just a very helpful
creative
community. Yeah.
See, I think of knitting-based magic as being related to like spider webs and entrapment, and aren't hangmaidens kind of along those lines?
Yeah, but if you're knitting a hat or a sweater or something, you're not.
Then you're going to entrap their head in your.
What are you knitting?
A hat.
Make it bigger. It sounds like you're just knitting hats that are too small.
Yeah. So, what about you guys?
I don't know at the moment. I mean, city magic, I think, is a really good answer. Yeah,
that was my original answer.
City magic is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a good one.
It is just a very cool practice, isn't it?
I mean, it depends on the city, right? Like, well, you got to go down and be like a Melbourne city mage, Reuben? Like, God, no.
Nah, yeah. I wouldn't want to be a Sydney city mage either, to be
Yeah,
honest.
that's fair.
Those go right over my head.
Yeah, we're just injecting some Australia banter in there.
What do you think, Elliot?
I feel like I gravitate towards saying collector. Just I think I've mentioned this the last time I answered this question too. Like, I had a thing as a kid. I used to spend as much time sorting my toys as I did playing with them. Like, I've always had hoardery.
I think you mean organizing them into diagrams?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, not a huge stretch from what I've been doing most of my life. So yeah, like I think collecting would be something I'd naturally gravitate towards. I do also think path adjacent stuff very much interests me. I don't know that I'd be up for much path running or finding, but I think my day job is the equivalent of like path adjacent stuff in the universe, and I could I think the paths are my favorite part of this universe and the one I feel like I probably understand the best. So that's where I'd want to
Interesting.
be near. I just don't want to be on them. They're fucking nightmares. I'll be the oracle. I'll be the person with the the camera and the voice in their ear telling them what to do, but I won't go there myself.
You're going to do some combination of technomancy and path running where you just send a drone down the path for you?
Yeah, exactly. I'll do a bit of goblin kinging on the side and get goblins and send them in.
Then you end up, that sounds awful. Just picturing, well, I mean, the goblins that we see in the story are just too enthusiastic about some of the horrible things that can happen on the paths. Was it the one with the path with the things get made big?
Yeah.
And they're just all like, oh yeah, that sounds great. I want to go do that.
Yeah, but like my day job is almost the equivalent of being the person who meets up with families like the Garricks and they show me the paths they've got, and then I would write reviews on them. Like that's sort of close to what part of my day job is. It's the part that I like. So like I don't know if this counts, but that's the sort of thing I'd love to look into if I lived in this universe, as being the person who like that lady from Pate, but for paths.
0 stars.
Promenade, 0 stars. Coffee was terrible. It tasted like a bad healing potion.
And ground glass. So there was one other thing I did want to mention. When Lucy is talking to Grandfather and Horseman, they talk about a forever war. I think they specifically say the words "forever war," and that's just a war where whose scope just wears down the participants. And I thought it was interesting because it's also the name of this sci-fi novel that was an allegory to the Vietnam War. Which, spoilers for this probably 50-year-old novel, but I think they say, soldiers going to war halfway across the world and coming home to realize nobody cared, nobody even recognized what they were doing, and that's pretty much a straight up summary of this novel, where humans are fighting this war against some alien species, and it's through the spaceships that they have is relativistic travel, so the soldiers all stay young while the society evolves away from them and connects to the soul. The soldiers become more alien to the greater society than the aliens that they're fighting, and I think it's kind of an interesting perspective on the conflict that we're seeing. Because it's both in contrast and a parallel to like the concern that the Awarants have. I don't remember if I wrote this or if this was in the actual text, but I wrote trees and shade, and that's the thing, like the story, you a good person plants trees knowing that they're never going to sit in that shade.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other side of that is also like this ties into, I think, the whole awarening plan, because like a big issue that comes with something like the dogs were advocating for, like, part of the reason soldiers like them fight is so other people don't have to be a part of the war, but part of the reason you get soldiers like the Kenneteers, who the rest of the world doesn't respect the war they fought, is because, like, in this world, most of those people literally don't know this is happening. Like, innocent people are unaware.
Yeah.
And so, like, a huge part of the awareing plan is, I think, to give people appreciation and close that gap.
Yeah, that's valid. That's a really good take.
Also, whoever had this Chloe's hug note, she definitely, I love this.
Okay, yeah, sure. So yeah, the Chloe's hug. I thought it was an interesting. I felt this really was the culmination of Lucy's overarching arc. Chloe's all knives, sharp edges, but she still has a soft hug. And it's kind of, the knives can define her, but she can still approach situations with compassion and love.
Yeah, and that hug comes at the end of the chapter where Lucy turns down the Sable's offer to become the Carmine.
Yeah.
And it's like right after Jazz has said she doesn't want to go to war. This is one of those things where somebody's brought this, and I'm just really mad that we didn't have it in the episode at the time, because I think you're right. The idea that Chloe is all knives and Lucy finds a way to hug her is such a perfect way to round out that chapter. Like, I love this.
I love Chloe. She's such a great.
Chloe's great.
Yeah.
She's a good bean.
So if one takes a ghoul as a familiar, or makes that kind of connection with a ghoul, do you give them, I think it's brought up at some point, is that a way to give them a reprieve from that kind of horrifying death thing that they've got going? Or
I think so.
Probably.
But then you'd get a bit more. Like, the last thing I need is to get sunburnt more easily, right? Like,
yeah,
should probably take a form of a porcupine or something.
Very skeletal
Yeah,
porcupine.
a really sickly looking
well, no, like a
porcupine.
dead porcupine, right? Like, that's the thing with ghouls, right? It's just like this roadkill porcupine. Like, her and Snowdrop get on great now.
Is Castleberry Chloe's animal form? That's the question.
What would Castleberry's familiar form be?
Well, definitely barely a cat. 10% more cat. I would love to see Castleberry end up with Chloe and Dibble at the end of the story. I don't know if Mrs. Schaff is planning on
That would be
helping
so
them out,
cute.
but I think there's some synergy there that would be fun.
Oh, absolutely. Though there's also I guess there's not synergy. I was about to say there's also synergy with the zombie cat, but no, because the zombie cat just likes to sit in the sun, and Chloe cannot.
I'm sure she has a ghoul cat in there somewhere.
I do love that the only reason that Ontario is not consumed in a zombie apocalypse is because the zombie cat is a cat and likes to be lazy and sit in the sun.
That is definitely the only reason.
Something else that we often ask folks to participate in is making some bold and specific predictions. So let's hear it. Who's got some bold and specific predictions to be made?
I don't know how bold or specific this prediction really is, but I'm pretty sure that life for the average fairy in the human world is going to be just as miserable as in the former court setup. Like, there's that door maker fairy, for example, who has this niche in a fairy market making doors, is not going to be any more successful or happy on Earth. But I'm also pretty sure that most fairies are only going to pay lip service to being on Earth, but they're going to create all these their own little hidden realms of existence that are, ostensibly still part of Earth, but not really. Things like hidden gardens or cave kingdoms or deepwood hollows or skyscraper penthouses, all, spun up with glamour. And technically, if you look at it, part of the human world, but actually separate. And I kind of also expect that people like Thea are going to make a killing making these demi-realms for Fae.
That'd be better than her current stick.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if she's going to be ripping people's souls out and shit, better them. I love this idea. Like, we talked a bit in our episode just now. Like, I think there's analogies to be had with what's happening to the Fae and the concept of, like, how online discourse is making authors directly accessible to their fans. And so I love the idea that all these little tiny pocket realms are kind of like analogous to like little Discord servers and little fan like fan sites.
That's interesting.
That's a That's a fun parallel. I like it.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like you're creating all these little realms for little fae to tell their own stories, and that's equivalent to how you have these spaces online and in the real world where fans meet up.
I wonder if all of these fae that we hear about who are banished from fairyland and living on Earth, now all the fae are going to be on Earth, and these banished ones are going to get banished back to fairyland.
Somewhere.
I think Marissa called out they're going to be the new heads of the pecking order because they're the ones who are most at home on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, for now, but when it comes to kick someone else out new, where are they going to send them?
Oh, I see. Well, I don't know, to winter.
Maybe.
Or down to the
The
Warrens.
Warrens. I mean, gosh, I don't know.
Oh,
Oh, even
I think
by
that's the
fae
best thing.
standards, oh,
That'll keep them all in line.
I don't think anything can keep fae in line.
I
I think you'd be better off trying to herd cats.
Yes, that's true. So I have a bold and specific prediction that I came up with a while ago. That's very elaborate, and I don't know if it is as likely to come true now as I thought it might be when I came up with it. But I'm going to share it anyway because I don't have a better one. So a few arcs back, there was a lot of talk about sort of religious symbolism with Charles. He had his, Catholic school group of followers. He had the Blessed Virgin Marichka as his lady counterpart. But for me, the parallel that I thought was most interesting was this idea of Charles as like a sort of evil opposite of like Jesus as per like the Christian narrative of his story. So you have Jesus, who is God, this higher power. He loves humanity, so he becomes human to save them from their sins.
Oh, yep.
And then you have Charles, who is a human, a practitioner, and he hates practitioners so much that he becomes a higher power so he can punish them extra hard for their sins. And
Love
I'm like,
that.
yes.
Mhm.
So I thought this was such a great idea. But then I thought, for a bold and specific prediction, why don't we take this to its conclusion? What happens to Jesus at the end of his story? Flip that upside down and see what that means for Charles. So, so there's kind of three things that happen at the end there. First of all, Jesus succeeds in his mission by allowing himself to be sacrificed, to be killed. He dies. And that fulfills his mission. So Charles, being the evil opposite of that, he will be presented with the opportunity to sacrifice himself for his mission, and he will fail to do so. So it'll be like he'll get this choice between, you can get everything you wanted, a world with no forswearing, a world where the seal is no longer the oppressive thing that it used to be, but you have to give up your own self, your own power. And he's just too cowardly. He cares more about his own self. He doesn't actually care so much about his goals. Just like Mershika, holding on to her fayness despite all of her protestations. So Charles is going to refuse to make that sacrifice that would be needed to fulfill his goal, and therefore his plan will fail. The second thing that happens in Jesus' story is after he dies, because of his sacrifice, you get the deeper magic from before the dawn of time, as the Narnia phrase is. He defeats death itself, comes back to life, and lives forever. And what this means for Charles is that Charles is going to confront death in the person of the Sable. And there will be this confrontation between the Carmen and the Sable. And just as Jesus died and therefore lives, Charles chose to live and therefore gets destroyed by the Sable. And the final thing in the prediction is, after Jesus comes back to life and then goes off to heaven, he sends the Holy Spirit to be with his followers, who comes down in the form of tongues of flame. And this clearly means that after Charles is gone, the next Carmen is going to be the girl by candlelight.
That last part you might have lost recently. I love a lot of
Well,
this.
I mean, why else would the next story be called Pyre if not for that?
Shit, yeah.
So anyway, that's my bold and specific prediction.
Yeah. Now that is a bold and specific prediction. Oh.
So I'll just leave that out there for everyone to admire.
I love how bold and specific that was. I love the flow of logic. Like yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I want to Tommy, I'm gonna throw an extra thing at you in bold and specific prediction category, because obviously you have just recently become a father. You are now wise to the ways of the world as a father. So
naturally,
what's the deal with Pisces?
I don't think I can tell you. You're not a father. You're not allowed to know.
One day, Elliot. One day we'll get him.
Cool. Well, okay. I'm gonna go install Tinder. Then I'm actually gonna start dating again because I need to sort that out. Apparently, like I'll have a kid to learn the answer to Pisces. No worries. Finally, an incentive.
I'm gonna make a confession. I haven't actually read the 100 Years Lost chapter.
Wait, what? Like more just. So,
wait, are you?
My surprise here doesn't come from that chapter specifically, but like, why have you not read a thing in Pale? Yeah. Like that's what my issue is with this statement.
Are you, Dante? Are you one of those people who reads Pale but ignores all the ancillary material?
No. I enjoy the ancillary material. I just have a really hard time reading like these dense textbooky type things. So I generally wait until there's an audiobook version of it. So that happened with the Familiar textbook and the Implement textbook and the Domain textbook. And it was going to happen with the 100 Years Lost textbook, but the audiobook hasn't gotten around to that one yet. So I haven't read it yet, so I don't know what any of this Pisces business is that people keep talking about.
Well, shit. Can't help but feel somewhat personally responsible for that too. Okay.
Why are you supposed to read that chapter?
Yes, actually. Partially, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's an extra incentive to get off my butt to do that. Cool. Well, yeah. Gosh, unless there's anything else anybody has.
I don't.
Actually, you know, I'm gonna throw out the whole endings thing I was talking about as a bold and specific prediction. I'm not going to put 3 spoonfuls of Brilk on the line like I did with Pisces again, but
that's probably wise.
That's going to be a one-time deal. I will say for this one, I think this chapter is setting up. I don't think Pale's going to have an ending that is like an ending. That's not very. That's bold and specific.
What does that mean?
That is not bold nor specific.
No, it's bold and specific. It's just not clear.
Bold and not specific.
No, it's specific. It's just hard to understand. No, what I mean is, I think when Pale ends, it's not going to feel like the end of the story. Like we're very much going to be sitting here waiting for Pyre. It's not going to wrap up like you might expect. I think maybe Charles will be gone. Maybe we'll sort of be done with the Kenneteers, but I think Pale is not going to have a rounded, satisfying or traditionally satisfying ending.
Do you think it's going to be like what Wildbow sort of threatened after summer break?
Not quite.
Where he would have just like called it quits for a few months and reveled in our panic.
Yeah, I think not quite that bad, but essentially yes.
Well, so he's going to go off and write, I don't know, the space opera Void, and that's going to be another 5-year story, and then he'll get to Pyre or Plex or whatever.
Yeah, I think
I think he's going to come back to it, and it'll just be Pale Arc 26.
Yeah, I think maybe like I guess the sort of thing I'm envisioning, like if I need to get bold and specific, like we might get like big wrap-ups for like major character arcs, like so like Charles will be dealt with and the Kenneteers will sort of get reach like big moments in their growth or whatever, but I think maybe the things like the resolution of what happens to Kenneth and that sort of stuff might be left fairly open for future stories.
Or the awarening itself.
Yeah, like
and how the knock-on effects there.
Like I'm not expecting to feel like all the threads have been wrapped up at the end of Pale anymore.
Yeah, definitely not.
Yeah, I buy that.
So I think that it's pretty clear, especially having been called out by Guillermo in this last chapter, that, when there is a story, there are still threads that continue on.
Yeah.
And the end of the story is not the end of, like, the timeline sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess the difference between what I'm saying now versus just the idea that there will be still loose threads, because I think we've always known Pale wasn't going to have a super neat ending.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yes.
Pale's almost going to be making a bit of a statement with it. Like, I get this is probably the new piece of information I feel like we got in 23.z's. It's not just going to be that there are loose threads. I think that's in a way going to be the point of Pale. Like, Pale will be making a statement in how some threads don't get resolved, because that's how life is.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess that's probably the new thing that I feel like I've been feeling since reading 23.z is Pale's going to make a specific point out of not ending traditionally.
That's interesting.
I'm going to be real mad at the story if it ends that way.
Yeah, I think it'll be a tricky line. It's a sort of thing where I think only Wildbow is bold enough as an author to tackle something like that, because it's going to be a balancing act to make it to give that sense of closure in a way, because he's going to be not doing that.
I do think if anyone can pull off something like that where it's satisfying and yet not, it would be Wildbow.
Yeah, exactly.
If only because of the sunk cost fallacy, we've already committed how much time and effort into this. Of course it's going to be satisfying. It has to be.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, yeah, so unless there's anything else, I think we'll do our outro and then get back to Pact in a bit.
Let's do it.
I mean, thanks for coming on, guys. Like, this was...
Thank you.
This was a blast. And yeah, if anybody isn't listening to Twigging onto Twig, sort yourself out and get on that.
Yeah, we're on a very short hiatus, but we should be getting back to regular. Apparently as long as Dante is okay with doing this time of recording, I can do that because the baby sleeps. We should be getting back to a relatively regular schedule.
Fingers crossed.
So no pressure, Dante.
Yeah. I have to admit, I am one of the people I'm yelling at right now. I've only listened to your intro episode, but I'm waiting to read Twig till after Pale ends, or apparently, as I've just predicted, doesn't. So yeah, I will be joining soon, but everybody else has no excuse. Do as I say, not as I do.
You hear that, Reuben?
Yeah, I'm partway through it, but I have to get back to it at some point for sure.
It being Twig or our podcast?
Twig specifically, and your podcast, I suppose, both.
I read Arc 1 for our episode on it like 3 years ago. I just don't remember what happened. I need to reread it, which will be fun. I remember liking it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's really good so far.
Your podcast is finally like, I don't think I would have gotten around to reading Twig until somebody did this. So I'm super glad this exists to motivate me the second Pale is over.
That was kind of part of the motivation. Like, more people should read Twig.
Yeah,
because
100%.
It deserves it.
Yeah, I was enjoying it and happened to meet Dante, happened to move to the same city, and we hung out, and he suggested it, and it just seemed like a good idea.
Yeah, so if you're not listening, be better than me. Check it out. Don't forget to also review both that show and our show on whatever your podcast platform is. That's how you boost the shows in the algorithm, and then that gets people to read Wildbow Works, and that's the pyramid scheme that we're all a part of.
Check out our Twitter as well. Check out our Twitter. Why not? We got stuff on there. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Does Twitter still exist?
For now,
yeah.
Yeah. And, stop by our Patreon, patreon.com/doofmedia, because, if we get enough money, we might buy Twitter Blue.
Yeah.
But, we need about 10,000 times what we're currently offering before I think that's a good investment. So,
but it's got all those great features that we need, Elliot. Like, there's got to be some.
I mean, people will know that they're definitely our shitty memes. Like, people, it won't be parody accounts doing shitty memes. It'll be us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. While you're on Patreon, why not check out Wildbow's Patreon as well? Patreon.com/Wildbow. It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
And to give.
And so I guess with that all said, let's go back to Pact. Get out of here, Malia. Um,
They're almost at a point. They're almost at a point where she won't have to do that anymore.
I know I'm running out of times I'm going to get to say that. Cool. What do we want to talk about in terms of pack?
I just wanted to get this out of the way first, just because I've been seeing a lot of discourse and conversation about how the ordinary family is a corruption of Johannes' domain. I don't buy it; it doesn't fit. But I just thought I should bring it up, just because it's come up so often. I just think the timeline doesn't fit, and the mechanics of it also don't really fit.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, because the ordinary family to me is like it's almost a complex spirit of innocence. Like it's Sharon as a raw field of energy, right? Like it's
Made
something
of
that
corpses.
strips magic out of stuff and turns it into like it's an embodiment of the white picket fence dream, and that
Yeah.
wasn't really what Johannes's domain was almost the opposite, which I guess is a link. Like,
Well, both of them are like semi-imaginary neighborhoods inhabited by shells full of dead rats.
yeah, true.
So you can kind of see how you'd think they'd be the same thing, or at least like one developed out of
Connected.
the other.
I don't think the timeline works though, because they mention the ordinary family was, they didn't know what it was. It was like a single house somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Ontario. They just kept contained for a while.
I
Whoever
mean, the middle
was
of nowhere,
containing it.
Ontario, meaning Jacob's Bell.
Well, that's not the middle of nowhere. You have an ant there, don't you?
It's the middle of the abyss, as well. It's not Ontario anymore. God, I hope Malia did leave. I yeah, I mean, I guess I could see the pathway from like in much the same way Yolda became the Hungry Choir through Charles's
Mm.
interference. I could see a link. Like, I think they're closely enough related that if we learned that some rascally summoner had taken some energy from Johannes's domain that leaked and merged it with other stuff, and that had become the ordinary family. Like, I think I can see that through line, but like I don't imagine that would have been a natural process.
I also feel like, and this is purely narratively, it would make the world a bit too small. There's enough room for all kinds of horrifying Potemkin village things existing out there.
Yeah, I feel like Stepford Wives energy exists enough for something like
Yeah.
the ordinary family to just sprout up. Yeah.
I think that for me, the biggest reason to discount this connection between Johannes's domain and the ordinary family is the dead rats thing, because that's kind of a key to their similarities. But
Mm.
in the case of the ordinary family, I'm pretty sure the dead rats are specifically related to Soot Sleeves being there
Yeah.
and her minions being absorbed by the ordinary family. So if we hadn't uh, gotten that glimpse of the workings of the ordinary family right after it had interacted with Soot Sleeves, we wouldn't have had that level of parallel between what we saw with Johannes, where he's full of rats because he's doing the whole Pied Piper shenanigans. So
Yeah.
I think that
Hmm.
because the rats come from two different places, and without the rats, there isn't really enough parallel to say, yeah, these are clearly the same. I don't think there's enough there. But if that
Mm.
weren't, if like that weren't the case, like, there is a very clear, at least visual structural parallel
Hmm.
between the two. That it definitely makes sense that people would link them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up the use of awarening as a strategy because Blake keeps pulling that out as like, I'm out of ideas. Let's awaren some people.
I'm out of ideas and my karma's already shit.
Yeah.
So he just keeps doing that, and now the Kenneteers are pulling it out of Blake's playbook. Um, Although they're probably doing it a lot smarter than he did. But I do think it's interesting that this is a recurring strategy of our other verse protagonists
Yeah,
to
that's a
make
parallel
their
that
friends aware.
Blake would get so mad if he could read Pale. Like, don't you reckon? Like, Blake would be like, you fucking... Like, oh, okay, so it's cool when you aware people. Oh, okay, so you get to beat the Abyss. Like, oh, okay.
Oh, also, you guys get power.
Yeah.
You don't have to cut yourself for blood every time.
Yeah, exactly.
On the other hand, Blake and Evan moving to Kennet would be a great place for them to just chill out in their retirement. Green Eyes and Tashlet would be BFFs. And
100%.
Mm-hmm.
I think Green Eyes passes the do you eat babies test?
Probably for lack of opportunity, though.
Yeah, I mean, I think she'd be willing to agree not to eat babies.
Yeah. I would be willing to bet she has not eaten a baby because she has not had the opportunity, and she would agree to not if, you know.
Well, and she was always pretty big on consent, right? Like, she asked if she could eat people's corpses, and like, you can't.
That is true.
Like, kids can't consent to that. I don't think. Well, no, there was that one.
Well, there's that
guy, that girl Ray had.
Yeah, who tried to get consent or gave
she was cool.
The hospital kids. Yeah, I always pictured her as the first appearance. Well, I'm blanking. Okay, Death in the Sandman, but more specifically, the death that appears the first time they run into one of like the psychopomps in Supernatural is.
Oh, yeah.
Like basically that character, right? It's like a girl or spirit or whatever who's in a hospital helping the suffering, or people who are about to die, helping them.
Yeah. God, that's twice today we've compared these good Wildbow stories to Supernatural. I feel so rude doing that.
What was number one?
I brought up a Supernatural comparison to 23.Z with the angels getting kicked out of heaven.
Right.
And the Fae getting kicked out of the fairy.
Should we talk about that, by the way? Because there are references to exiled Fae that are made explicitly that feel like they're...
Oh, true!
Oh, for sure, Padraig. Podrick, yeah.
I think you mean Maggie Holt.
Well, actually, to be fair, the reference was to someone pretending to be a girl, so I guess he was in Maggie Holt form at the time, yeah.
Or it could have been the other one who was pretending to be Joanna.
That is true.
Fuck, yeah. God, those three...
God.
Yeah. And they're going to be like top dogs. Like, that's what's fun about, like, in terms of like Pyre setup for this. It was just like, now the exiled fairy are going to be on top, and it was like, oh fuck, Podrick's going to be like the guy in Ontario now. Like, Jesus, Marissa, you psychopath.
You thought Marissa was bad.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they don't even need to fight Charles. They just need to wait until he comes across Padraig and shuts down on his own.
Yeah, I mean, which side is Padraig going to fall on there?
His own.
Sure.
I mean, because you've got Gerhild sitting there as well, right? Like, I think whenever we've talked about Pyre prediction stuff and these back-to-back things, we've always brought up like Gerhild and Padraig as two obvious big things, and we used to wonder how Marissa would fit into that with what she was doing, and turns out all of our dreams were realized because she's just fucking put them both on the, like, there's no way Mags isn't in the middle of some fucking shit during Pyre. Like,
well, I mean, Pyre is the fire and blood, right?
It almost certainly is going to have to be.
It has to be. Yeah.
And that's the weird thing. Like, I hope for Mags's sake that she's just been chilling in Ottawa or something for this whole, because like with all of Charles's shit that's been going down, like, he's just put, his 10,000 others all throughout his region and stuff. You're just like, God, I hope Mags wasn't around for this. Like, imagine how much worse Charles's shit would be getting right now if Mags was in town.
Yep. I kind of imagine she's like moved off to some remote island where if something happened, it would at least just be her dealing with it.
Well, we saw her in Poke, and she's around.
Yeah, she's.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Down in the Warrens doing her thing.
Yeah, and she's also she shows up for a little bit in Mile End, which is why I hope that she's out in Ottawa. Just because that's outside of
Mile
Charles.
End in Montreal.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah.
No, you're right. That was set in Montreal, not Ottawa. I've gotten Marlin.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. Even better. Montreal's even further away, I think. So
It is.
yeah, cool. I hope she's still hanging out in Montreal for her sake and for everyone else's. The last thing we need is more fire and darkness shit to get mixed in to Charles.
Maybe she's already had all of her fire and darkness.
No, you got to save the last one for
Maybe
fire.
she miscounted.
No, it just happened off screen.
Oh, I see.
No, get Miscount to inhabit her.
Yes.
Yeah,
She
that's
can host
funny.
Miscount.
Ay. So what else have we got on our back-to-pack list to talk about?
I don't really have anything else, but if she's in Mile End, I hope she's enjoying her nice bagels. There's some nice bagels up there.
Yeah, love me some round bread.
Yeah, Elliot doesn't know what bagels are because apparently they don't have real bagels in Australia or something.
Wait, is that a thing?
Oh, they're just round bread.
No.
Yeah,
Incorrect.
Elliot's being a fool.
Reuben, you were on my side last time I said this. You backstabber.
No, it's not. They're not just round bread. They're made slightly different, Elliot, than just round bread.
Yeah,
They're boiled in like an alkaline.
But they're not.
Smarties and M&Ms are made in different shit. You know what they are? They're the fucking same thing.
I mean, they're not, but
They are not.
they're just quite similar.
Jeez. I mean, yeah, okay. It's like slightly different to bread, but it's just.
Oh, it is a bread. It is a bread. Yes.
It's just a
But
round
just
bread.
describing it as a round bread,
That's
it's
what
like-
it is.
but so is a hamburger bun.
Yeah.
Or a Kaiser roll.
What's
What?
a Kaiser roll?
Like from Super Mario Bros? A Kaiser roll?
Kaiser, wait, is this? Are
You don't have Kaiser rolls down there.
What's a
Are you
Kaiser
pulling my
roll?
leg
Like the
right now?
bad guy from Worm?
I'm googling it. Oh, okay. It's like we might call it a Vienna roll down here.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a Vienna roll. Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, cool.
Anyway, sorry.
Hey, we've hit the point where we start talking about bread, so that means it's the end of the show, as
Yeah.
always.
I had one more bit here, but I've forgotten what I
Oh.
was thinking when I wrote it, so I don't.
The UBI trial.
We
Yeah,
talked
wasn't
about
there-
it. Didn't we
Oh, in
already talk
Ontario?
about it in the episode?
Did I? No, there
I
was
don't
like
think
a,
we talked
there,
about it.
there was like a universal basic income trial in Ontario in real life, wasn't there? Like
Yeah, it was
5
like
years
a-
ago.
It was like a couple of towns in Ontario. Didn't affect me.
Yeah, and
Um,
then what's this? There was like some guy, was it Robert Ford or something, shut it down?
Doug Ford, yeah. He got
Yeah.
elected and was like, yeah,
That's
we're
not
doing
making
this.
me money personally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Therefore,
Anyway, that's who Gerhild is. The Gerhild is that Doug Ford guy. Calling it now.
How is Gerhild that? I can see you saying like Musser is Ford or Charles is Ford, but how is Gerhild Ford?
No, Gerhild feels like more of a Trump. I guess I was just trying to. This is a very half cooked idea, but there's something about Kennett and all their wokeness being the UBI trial, and so some of the villains in the story being Doug Ford. TBD.
Yes.
Anyway, this is why I didn't want to bring it because it's not a finished thought.
That's
fair enough.
Yeah, I definitely went when Musser was going around and trying to get everyone in Ontario to follow his stuff. I was kind of like, oh look, Musser is being Doug Ford in the other verse.
Yeah. I feel like we talked about that briefly on the podcast back then too. Actually, I might have already made this joke. That's even worse. Even this segment keeps getting worse.
Good job. Way to go, Tommy, making him bring that up.
Sorry.
No, I
feel
mean I wrote
very
it. That's
bad.
my own fault. Cool. Well, on that note, let's do our classic outro for the back to pack section.